and we can.
Who was that lady that said something when I came through? I just saw her in the hall, and she goes, I didn't mean to, she said something about, she didn't mean to say something to me, and she said, but I was looking for this little boy who lost his shoe, or something. It was like, oh, that's okay.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Do I look like the little boy that lost his shoe? I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, they're good folks. I think they're curious about who's here, because they came and talked to me at one point in time. They were just kind of curious. So, well, let's take a moment together. A lot of excitement with the new meditation center coming next week, and a lot of things in our lives that we're working with and dealing with and excited about. So it's an opportunity to let those things go temporarily. Just take the opportunity to work on ourselves mindfully and to cultivate some wholesome, skillful wisdom. So we can do that by intentionally letting go of those things that prevent us from meditating, prevent us from being calm and quiet of mind and body. And then we can cultivate some of those wholesome qualities that are so helpful in meditation practice and in just life in general. And as we normally do, those are compassion. In Pali, that's karuna. Then there's metta, loving kindness, mudita, which is appreciative joy, and upekkha, which is equanimity. So these are the qualities that we are cultivating tonight as we gather here together. So with that, I'll sound the bell. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Namaskar. Welcome, everyone. And welcome to our last class here. So kind of exciting. Well, if you want to get comfy, we'll practice together, do our meditation. Whatever is the most comfortable position for you is probably the best position for you to meditate. Try to get into a posture or a position where the body is not in conflict, where the muscles are not overly tense, just enough tension to maintain the posture that you're in. Find a comfortable place to put your hands at your sides. If you're laying down, maybe on your lap, on your thighs or knees if you're sitting. Let the eyes close softly, and let the breath just be natural. Let it come and go however it wants. And now I'll sound the bell, and I'll start to guide us through the practice. Follow the sound of the bell. Follow it right into silence. And let that silence be a very warm, very pleasant, very welcoming invitation to turn your senses inward. After we practice meditation for a while, we start to become aware of our own bodies and our own minds as a place of refuge, as a place where we can be present and find peace right where we are at any time or any place. So cultivating this capacity of being present within our own bodies, this embodied cognition or embodied consciousness, this is a very helpful, very valuable quality to cultivate. So we begin by just turning our senses inward and focusing on the sense of presence we have in our own bodies. Just the feeling of being here, being in your body, being present, being aware, being in the present moment. And with that sense of presence and awareness established, let's bring the awareness up to the top part of the head, to the area of the scalp. And with awareness focused here, just begin to open up awareness to the physical sensations in the scalp. Just opening up, observing, taking notice of whatever physical sensations make themselves known. So these could be the temperature sensations of warmth or coolness. Even neutrality can be a temperature sensation. Sometimes we detect air movement on the surface of the scalp or in the hair. Sometimes there are sensations on the surface of the skin, and these can be things like tickles or itches or a little pulsation. So again, you're just opening up awareness to whatever physical sensations are present in the scalp. And then if, as you're observing, you notice any tension in the scalp, or you can look specifically for tension, you can release that. Just let go, allow the scalp to relax fully. Let the tension leave the body. And then just continue to observe sensations just as they are, arising and passing away, coming and going. And then from the scalp, we can begin to move the awareness downward into the forehead, into the temples, also through the eyebrows and into the eyes. Once again, focus awareness in these parts of the body and simply observe the physical sensations as they come and go. And again, these sensations are temperature, air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin. And in these parts of the body, if there's any tension, again, we can just let that go. It can be an unconditional, unquestioning release of tension. Letting the brow relax if it's furrowed. Letting the temples soften if they're tight. Allowing the eyebrows to relax. And letting the eyes, the eyelids rest in their sockets. And then we just continue to observe sensation. From the temples now, we can move our awareness down to the ears and become aware of physical sensations here. And as we observe sensation, I use the names or ways of identifying these sensations to aid in the practice. But as you observe, you can just let go of the words and the concepts. And instead, just be present with the sensations themselves. No words or identifiers are necessary. Just your awareness of sensation. Let the sensation awareness move now through the cheekbones and into the face. Let it move down from the eyes. Let it pass through the nose, through the lips and mouth, and into the chin. And observe the sensations throughout the face, including the ears. Notice any places of tension and allow that to go. Check in with the jaws, the teeth, see if they're clenched and release them. Let the lips soften. Let any muscles of the face relax. And continue to observe the sensations of temperature, air movement, and sensations on the surface of the skin. Now from the chin, we can move the awareness downward into the neck. We can begin at the throat, noticing sensations here, and then moving awareness to the sides of the neck, both sides simultaneously, moving awareness to the back of the neck. Just noticing the sensations as they come and go, letting go of the tension, and continue to be aware. From the neck, we can guide the awareness downward into the shoulders. Become aware of the sensations here. And in the shoulders, you might notice a sensation of contact between the shoulders and the surface upon which you're resting, the chair or the floor. Or you might notice the feeling of contact between your skin and your clothing. So these are just some additional sensations that you may notice. But let the shoulders drop. If they're shrugged, let them relax fully. Continue observing as you allow the awareness to move downward into the upper arms. And then we'll spend just a moment observing the different parts of the upper arm. First, the biceps, from the top of the shoulder all the way down to the elbow joint. And then from there we can rotate inward to the inside surface of the upper arms. Then we can rotate further to the triceps or the backs of the upper arms. And then once again rotate to the outside surface of the upper arms. Again from the shoulder all the way down to the elbow joint. Observing sensations, letting all the tension go. Let this releasing and relaxing, let this be the way you greet tension in the body. Discovering tension, you simply release. No other response is necessary. Feel as the awareness moves down through the elbow joints now. Follow it as it moves down through the forearms. Continue to follow it as it moves down towards the wrists. And again, in all these areas, just be aware of the sensations. Let the tension go and continue observing. Move the awareness down through the wrists and feel it flowing into the hands. Observe the heels of the hands and then the palms. Moving around, observe the tops of the hands, the fingers and the thumbs, letting any tension go. And then bring the awareness into the tips of the fingers, to the fingernails. Just patiently observe, attentively observe the fingernails. Give it time. See if any sensations become known. Just observe. Feel the sensations. And then from the fingernails, we'll maintain a continuity of awareness. We'll move the awareness up to the top of the chest, stretching across the collarbones, and then we'll begin to feel as the awareness moves downward through the chest, through the muscles and tissue, all the way down to the base of the sternum. And as that awareness moves, it is simply aware of sensation. And if that sensation includes tension, we just release. And then from the sternum, we allow the awareness to flow outward through the rib cage. And then from the rib cage, we can bring the awareness up to the underarms. And then observe as the awareness begins to move down through the sides of the body, all the way down to the waist. Observing sensation, letting go of tension. And from the waist, we can guide the awareness forward into the belly. Spend a few moments here observing sensation, the rising and falling of the belly with the breath, the expansion and contraction of the belly. Release any tension you find there, letting the belly rest and relax fully. And then from the belly, again, we'll maintain our continuity of awareness as we make the move around to the top of the back. And we'll start at the base of the neck and observe as the awareness flows downward through the upper third of the back. Feel it as it passes through the shoulder blades, through the muscles of the upper back. Observe as the awareness moves downward through the middle third of the back. Be aware of the sensations as it passes through, and let tension go. And finally move the awareness down into the lower part of the back. And in the full back, from top to bottom, you can observe sensation. If there's anything like discomfort or an unpleasant sensation, perhaps pain in the body, it can be difficult to release tension around sensations that are unpleasant. But if you become aware of them, if you become aware of the spaciousness of your own awareness, you can allow as much space as is necessary for these difficult sensations to be just as they are. You find that it is not necessary to resist an unpleasant sensation in the body. You can just allow it to be. Let it be fully embraced by awareness. Allow tension to go. Just let the sensations of the body be as they are. And notice how in that expansive awareness that you are able to observe all things without reacting with negativity or with unwholesome thoughts or emotions. From the lower back, you can guide the awareness downward. Feel it moving down through the sit bones. Feel it passing through the hips. Feel it moving throughout the pelvis, Just observe all the sensations. If any of them are sensations of tension, just release. Let all these areas be at rest and at ease. And you can guide the awareness downward into the thighs. And we'll spend a moment with the different parts of the thighs. First, the top surface of the thighs, running from the pelvis all the way down to the knee joint. So the long expanse of the thigh on top. The sensations here, releasing tension. And then rotating to the outward surface of the thigh, again from the top all the way down to the knee joint. Just observing and releasing. Moving to the underside of the thigh or the back of the thigh. And then rotating once again to the inside surface of the thigh, from the top all the way down to the knee. And then feel as the awareness passes through the knee joints. Observe the sensations. Continue moving with the awareness downward. Feel it moving through the calves. Feel it moving through the shins. Feel that soothing presence of awareness moving down through the ankles. Observe as it moves through the ankles into the feet. And with awareness in the feet, we can observe the sensations in the heels. We can move to the soles of the feet, observing if there's any tension there. Again, just release. Moving through the balls of the feet, moving around to the tops of the feet, feeling as awareness moves downward into the toes, an illuminating sensation with awareness and releasing any tension. And then finally bringing that awareness into the toenails. Just giving it a few moments, see if any sensations arise in the toenails. Now from here, we'll move the awareness once again up to the top of the head and to the area of the scalp. But this time, feel free to move it at your own pace. Move the awareness downward through the body. Try to move it through part by part, though, in about the same order that we did it together. You just want to be able to move the awareness through each part of the body without leaving anything out. Observing the sensations once again, noticing the tension wherever you find it, releasing that tension. You know that the tension in the body will often come about as a result of stress. It will come about as a result of worry, fear, anger. And what we discover through this process of mindful awareness is that even after the situations have passed that maybe caused us to be angry for a time or caused us to be worried, even after those situations pass away, that the tension often remains in the body. And for many of us, it remains in certain parts, habitually. The jaws, or the shoulders, or the belly, or it could be anywhere. So as we take note of these places where tension appears habitually, we can release that tension. We can know that we are releasing the stresses, the anxieties, the worries, the fears, the angers, letting all of it go, letting the tension leave the body. And once you've had a chance to move your awareness through the body at least once, you can bring the awareness up to the base of the nose. And now we'll begin to focus all of our awareness very directly on the little patch of skin beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip. Just focus on this patch of skin, and then expand the awareness just a bit further to include the rings of the nostrils. And expand the awareness a bit further to include the nasal passages. So now you have awareness of this triangular area of the nose. And with your awareness focused here, just become aware of the movement of the breath in and out. Breathing in, simply be aware that you're breathing in. And breathing out, simply be aware that you're breathing out. And as you observe the in-breath, try to stay with it for its full duration. Observe as it comes in and slows, pauses for a moment. Then it reverses direction and becomes the out-breath. And remain with the full duration of the out-breath. This is the continuity of awareness, not letting go, just continuing to observe. Breathing in, you're aware that you're breathing in. Breathing out, you're aware that you're breathing out. And as you follow the breath, become aware of the touch of the breath anywhere within this triangular area of the nose. There is, as the breath moves, a sensation of touch, a feeling of touch. And if you observe that feeling of touch attentively, you might become aware of more subtle sensations. Breathing in, the air feels a little drier. Breathing out, the air feels a little more moist. Breathing in, the air feels cooler. Breathing out, it's a little warmer. Just remain aware of the breath. Try to take in as many sensations of the breath as possible as it moves in, as it moves out. Don't manipulate the breath in any way, just follow, just observe. Let this focus on the breath concentrate the mind. As you do this, there might be moments where you notice that the awareness has drifted away from this observation of the breath. Sometimes it moves away to follow sounds. We hear a sound in the room or in our own bodies or in the building, and the curious mind goes to those sounds. But in the moment you become aware of that, just take the opportunity to guide the awareness back to the triangular area of the nose. And once again, just reestablish this awareness of the breath. The movement of the breath and the touch and the sensations. Just continue to observe. It doesn't matter how often sounds distract you, just repeat the process. Sometimes distractions come as physical sensations in the body, and we find that awareness goes to these sensations, Sometimes it could be fatigue or discomfort. Sometimes it's a tickle or an itch. But again, in the moment you become aware that awareness has moved away from the breath, just take the opportunity to return to the triangular area of the nose and just very unceremoniously reestablish awareness of the breath. It is okay to do this over and over. Just remain aware of the breath. And then if some point you notice that the mind has maybe just wandered on its own in thought, imagining, again, follow that process of, in the moment that you notice, just returning the awareness to the breath, to the triangular area of the nose. Focusing awareness here, letting go of all distractions. And notice that in the releasing of distractions, that you are also releasing the reactions that often go along with them. In doing this, you are cultivating equanimity, peacefulness, and concentration. Let's spend a few minutes together observing the breath silently. Just spend a few minutes and then I'll sound the bell to end this meditation practice. And take your time, bringing your awareness back to the room. Maybe taking the opportunity to move the body a little bit, move the major joints, do a little stretching, just get a little movement going. But maintain the equanimity that you cultivated, the mindfulness. Just keep that going. Wonderful. So I think, well, last week we started talking about the title was That Which Has Been Put Together.
Yeah.
I think Don and Cheryl, you were both here, so
Yes.
Linda wasn't.
So I know.
And then I think we'll probably get to, well, we'll see. Here's 3 of these guys. I think we'll get to the wanting mind tonight, but we'll see. Thank you so much.
Where are we launching it to?
What's that?
Oh, wanting, I think it's at the launching.
Oh, yeah,
Where
well,
we launch it.
it's kind of the launching mind too. But we'll spend a little time with last week's talk, that which has been put together. And really what this was a way of becoming aware of how our experience, just our normal, everyday human experience, comes together. And that it is not an accident, but it's the result of the sense inputs making contact with their corresponding objects. And that sounds kind of complicated, but it's really not. It's if you look at an object and the eyes are functioning, there's contact between the eyes and that object, and so there's sight. And so that becomes part of your experience, or else there is a sound and the ears make contact with the sound if the ears are functioning or if the sound is loud enough. And then there's the experience of hearing. And then the same is true with smells or tastes or touches. So these are the normal 5 senses. So these are our sense inputs, and their corresponding objects just create these different types of sense consciousness. So that's really the basis of human experience. But then to that, we'll add one more, which is traditionally done in Dhamma teachings. The 6th is the mind itself. Because right now, for example, I could ask you to just imagine an apple. And because you've seen an apple before, you could picture it in your mind's eye. You could maybe even imagine what it feels like to hold an apple, kind of the density and the weight. And there's sort of a sound that an apple makes if you're touching it. There's sort of a hollowness to it. There's a sensation of touch, kind of the smoothness of the peel. Sometimes there's sort of a waxy quality to it. And we could even imagine kind of the smell and the taste of an apple. And then we might even have kind of the experience of the mouth watering a little bit, or kind of that feeling of puckering. So the mind itself can be just like a direct sense experience where the mind is thinking or imagining or remembering or in any way operating, and this can become part of our experience. And for most of us, that can become pretty intense. Just as real in every way as actual physical objects that come into contact with our senses. And in fact, many of us spend quite a bit of our lives just sort of living in that mental area. And sometimes that is helpful. We're planning things, we're figuring out ways to solve problems or to complete tasks, or we're kind of budgeting out our time, different things like that. The mind can be helpful in those ways, or we can think of people that might need our assistance and we might offer them goodwill or wishes, or we might go help them, or we might say some positive things to them. So the mind can be very helpful in that sense. But then most of us too experience this more difficult side of the mind, which is we worry about things. We think about people that we care about, and we worry about how they're doing, and we sometimes imagine bad circumstances. Like, it's kind of scary. And the body's really reacting to it. It's stress we feel. And it's just as real as if we were actually experiencing it, because we are. We're experiencing it in the mind. We feel the stress or the worry, or sometimes we fear things. And a lot of people who are drawn to meditation practice find that can be really kind of afflictive at times. We have difficulty escaping the thoughts in the mind and the kind of proliferation of thought, one thing leading to another, which leads to another. But becoming aware of all this stuff as a process is really helpful in working with it in our mindfulness practice, in our daily practice. So we start to look at it as kind of this orderly, lawful process that's unfolding, and we can see that it has causes due to sensory inputs or due to thoughts, due to the way we're working with our thoughts, and we can understand that all of this comes together and adds up to our experience. So it's something that we can be aware of as a process. And that becomes helpful because we don't think of it as just something that kind of lands on us and now we have to deal with it. Or somehow, if you've ever had the feeling of, geez, am I cursed or what? Why do these bad things keep happening in my life? Or, what am I doing wrong? Well, when we become aware of this orderly, lawful process taking place, we can also become aware of what it is that's causing these things. And if we become aware of their cause, we can work with them skillfully and find a lot of peace, find a lot of release. We can find wholesome and healthy ways to let go. So we talked a little bit about, last week I just used the example of kitchen cabinets because that's where I was when I was writing this talk. I was just sitting there and I looked at the kitchen cabinets and I thought how my experience of those kitchen cabinets at the meditation center has changed over time. At one time there were cabinets in there, the ones when I got the space, and I decided for a few reasons that I would pull those out and replace them. So the cabinets that were in there, they kind of became to me the old cabinets, and then the cabinets I put in became the new cabinets. And I look at the cabinets and think about, well, why are they cabinets? What makes them cabinets? And because of the way they've been put together and because the way that we've been taught or we've conditioned the mind, we see them and we say, yeah, those are kitchen cabinets. We kind of recognize them. But all these materials have been assembled, and all of these materials are, and this is kind of Thich Nhat Hanh terminology. He says these cabinet elements, or the cabinet is made of non-cabinet elements. So he talks about how, everything we see, it comes together as this sort of completed whole, but it's really made up of a whole lot of different things. And so we can think about that and think of all the things that came together to make cabinets, the plywood and the particle board and the pieces of oak and the way they were crafted and built and put together. And then sometimes it's interesting to think about at what point do they not become cabinets, or at what point are they no longer cabinets? If you took the doors off, would they still be? Or if you were to pull the shelving out, would they still be? Or if you were starting to bang out one surface or one side or the other? There's everything that comes together to form whatever it is we recognize through conditioning. You can also start to disassemble that, and at some point it becomes something else. So again, this is just sort of this awareness of how these lawful processes are taking place. It's not particularly mystical or magical, but this is the coming together of these different elements or these different objects, contact with the senses. We add to that the conditioning that's taking place inside the mind, and we have these experiences. Moving to where we left off last week, this was towards the bottom of page 2, and it's the section that starts with that which puts together. So it may seem like reactions, and I'm reading from the text now, it may seem like reactions originate somewhere beyond your control. Now we're talking about reactions to things. It may seem like that happens somewhere beyond your control, but with a little practice, you'll find that you can decide what your reactions will be. And we discover this in our meditation as we sit and we observe the reaction that we have to different distractions. Sometimes we're annoyed by sounds, sometimes we're intrigued by them, or we get curious, we try to figure out what they are. Sometimes we kind of name them in our heads. Other times they're physical sensations in the body, and we tend to like pleasant sensations. So sometimes there's sort of a peaceful driftiness in the meditation. We might find that pleasant. Sometimes we'll kind of snap out of that peaceful driftiness, and maybe there's a sharpness to our consciousness or awareness, and maybe we don't care for that so much, and so there might be a reaction to that. And we find that a lot of times these reactions will get going, but then we can, with relative ease, we can let go of the distractions or the different things that are causing those reactions, and we can move back to the awareness of the breath, and we can see how our releasing of these reactions can help us find peacefulness. So this is really useful that we do it in meditation practice, because then we start to see how we can do that in the rest of life as well. So 2 weeks ago we were concluding our talk about the Noble Eightfold Path, and we had left off with Samma Sankappa, which is right intention, or sometimes called right thought. And so this is a really important part of this practice, and it ties right into what we're talking about tonight, is that we're, with right intention, what we're doing is we're approaching things with a mind that is focused on the wholesome. We're trying to improve our lives. We're trying to improve the lives of others. We're trying to let go of negativity or unwholesome things that are occurring in our consciousness or in our lives. And so just this intention to do that wholesome thing is very important, very helpful. The suttas, the teachings, they talk about this process of putting together at length. And it says, and we've talked about this before, but it's really helpful to come back to it from time to time and look at it in different ways. But the suttas say that there are 5 distinct parts or aggregates that occur together in quick succession, sometimes just about simultaneously, that form our experience of being. So again, understanding these, it just helps us with this sort of this demystification process so that we can work with it in a very hands-on way. So the 5 aggregates are rupa, which means form, vijnana, which means cognition, sana, which means recognition, sometimes called perception, vedana, which means sensation, and sankhara, which means reaction. The 5 aggregates are sometimes referred to by the Buddha as the 5 aggregates of clinging, because they are the basis for what drives craving, clinging, and aversion. The basis for it simply because that's the way we have experiences. And so our experiences, if we are not mindful, they can slowly evolve into craving or clinging or aversion, which causes us to suffer. But when they're understood, they can become the 5 aggregates of freedom, because they help us to see that how we react is actually volitional. In other words, we do have some say in how it is we react to things. Now, at first, The reactions, again, they might just start. And at some point we become aware, oh, I'm reacting. Maybe I'm reacting to something with anger. It's just, in many ways, it's habitual. Something happens, and I've just sort of always been annoyed by it or irritated by it. And it happens again. I happen to be practicing mindfulness. It happens again. I still get angry, but maybe fairly quickly I realize, oh yeah, I've gotten angry about that thing. Is it possible for me to just let go of that anger? I can still deal with the thing, but if I let go of the anger, I tend to feel more peaceful. I feel better about it. So it's not a pretending that the thing isn't happening. It's just noticing that the way we react to it can make us feel really uncomfortable. It can make life feel very unpleasant. So sometimes by taking a look at that, hey, this thing that happened made me respond with anger. I think I'm going to try and work with that anger. I'm going to try and let that anger go. I'm going to see if I can move to equanimity. And then in that equanimity, you're probably better off in dealing with the situation. You'll be able to solve it because you kind of got the cool head, the level-headedness. If you've ever tried to deal with something when you're really angry about it, it's hard to do. Sometimes you just sort of bang holes in things or do more damage than you're helping. We use this term wholesome or unwholesome, and we could say that an action is either wholesome or unwholesome based on the intention behind it. So wholesome actions tend to produce happiness and lead us towards freedom, while unwholesome actions tend to produce suffering. And unwholesome actions, usually in the teachings, they are described in three ways. Actions that are motivated by greed, by hate, and by delusion are unwholesome, while actions motivated by kind of the polar opposite, by generosity, virtue, and wisdom, are considered wholesome. So again, you might start to react with greediness. You might start to react with hatred or with delusion. Delusion being sort of a refusal to look at things as they really are, or a refusal to look at things through the eyes of mindfulness, and instead to just look at them through the eyes of attachment. But as soon as you become aware of that, the intention that you have can be to move toward the wholesome. So some of the things that, now greed, a lot of times we associate that word with like, a hunger for money. But greed can really be a lot of things. It can be an unhealthy desire for attention, for example. Sometimes we can think that our relationship with another person is maybe based on love, and it might be, but we've probably all had that feeling of insecurity or sort of a greediness for more of their attention. Sometimes we can look at that and we can see that it's just kind of, it's arising based on feelings of doubt or feelings of jealousy. And so this is just a real subtle type of greed. So it's just something to be aware of. Is it bad? No, it's not evil or anything like that. But it's just an awareness that, when I'm operating in greed or operating with greediness, that I don't feel good. I feel like I need more of whatever it is. And so it can even be about spiritual pursuits sometimes, like, I'm not progressing fast enough. I need more, or it can turn into a spiritual materialism. Sometimes we call it that. So greed, it can manifest in very subtle ways, not just a desire for money, but a desire for more youth, more power, for being more loved, for being more respected. And none of those things are wrong on their face, but it's just if we start to get out of balance with any of those things, we can just start to feel pretty lousy. Hate, sometimes we just call that ill will. In the political climate that we live in right now, it's pretty easy to start to have feelings of ill will when we look at people that we think are doing things that are going to harm others or do things that are going to leave people stranded or in trouble. But through mindfulness, we can see that hate or ill will is unwholesome because it does cause us to suffer, often causes others to suffer, but we can be aware that there's a wholesome way that we can work with that desire for things to be better. So we can maybe take action to help others. And by letting go of the hatred or the ill will, we can do that skillfully so that we're not going to suffer as much, at least, but we're able to still operate in the world as a very vital, very active person, but we're able to let go of some of that hostility and hatred and ill will that so easily crops up. It's pretty easy, right? I mean, you can just watch the news for a couple minutes and you get kind of ticked off, But that feeling of anger or hostility or kind of hatred for whatever it is, again, that in and of itself, that's not helping. But you can look at what's behind that. What's my intention? What do I really want to do here? What do I want to create? And we find that there are things we can do that are wholesome. We can understand issues. We can talk about them with other people without trying to mislead, without trying to cause division. This is what we call right speech. Again, actions motivated by generosity, by virtue, and by wisdom are wholesome because they don't cause negative karma, they don't cause negative reactions that we're going to have to deal with the outcomes of. Even if we make a mistake, you might step on an insect and kind of feel bad about it, but if you weren't trying to, it's a little easier to let that go because your intention is non-harm, or your intention is generosity. You might try to be generous and you might botch things up as you're doing it, but your intention was to be generous, or your intention was to be virtuous. Even if you said something that hurt somebody, if your intention was truly virtuous, it's easier to let go of that. So the teaching on the 5 aggregates was offered as a way of showing us that what seems like an overwhelming flood of experience is actually something observable. And if you can observe the individual parts of experience, you can also change them. Pardon me. So not a super complex teaching, but one that has some pretty powerful ramifications. There's a term that the Buddha uses, which is disenchantment. So, like watching a movie at the theater, when we first arrive, we get our popcorn and candy, and we find a seat. And all the while, we're fully aware that we're at the movie theater getting ready to watch a movie. I don't know if you go often to movies, but when I go, which is kind of rarely, but when I go, that's what I do. I get snacks, I get stuff, and I go in, I kind of scout out where I want to sit, and you're going to a movie. You're in a movie theater. after the movie starts, once you get through all the commercials and stuff in the beginning, you start to get into the movie, and you find yourself forgetting that you're watching a movie, and you start to get lost in the story. Soon you're on the edge of your seat when there's a suspenseful scene, and you're choking up when there's a sad scene. And you're really reacting to this movie as if it was really happening, and you forget that you're in a movie theater watching the movie. But then in the midst of all that, somebody in front of you might stand up to step out, and right then the spell is broken, and we remember, maybe you don't consciously say it, but you remember that you're there in the movie theater watching a movie. So there's this disenchantment. So it's not disenchantment as in disappointment, which we often interpret it as. That's, kind of the American English version of that. But the Buddha talked about being enchanted by the experience of the senses, and this is very much like the movie theater experience. So you can just think of that. In the movie theater, totally caught up in the drama, totally caught up in the scenes that are taking place, reacting, tightening up in the body, real visceral physical reactions to it. But then in one moment of awareness, all of that can come to an end, and you can be back in the understanding of what's actually taking place. So when we steer our thoughts in the direction of peace and freedom, that is samma sankappa, or right thought. As we talk about what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, there are in the teachings what are called the 10 unwholesome actions. And of course, Buddhism is great for lists and numbers of things, and so there's just virtually an unending supply of them. But these are actually kind of helpful, because if we think about, well, what are unwholesome actions, we can actually look at these and understand them. So there's 3 unwholesome actions of the body: killing living beings, taking that which is not freely given, and misusing sexuality. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. 3 unwholesome actions of the body. So if you act doing any of those 3, these are unwholesome actions, and they're going to cause suffering in yourself and in other beings. There are 4 unwholesome actions of speech: saying what is not true, using angry or harsh speech, speaking maliciously of others, and then entertaining ourselves with idle chatter and gossip. That last one, the idle chatter and gossip, that sounds a little old-fashioned, and in some ways it kind of is, but if you think about it, if you're just getting together with somebody and just kind of, just talking about things for a while, you notice that it doesn't take long before you start to kind of move towards talk about things that are sort of negative and unpleasant. It's just kind of a habit that we have, it's like, it's not really fun to talk about maybe the good stuff. It's more interesting to talk about, did you hear about, this or that thing that happened? So sometimes that can just be idle chatter and gossip, and so it can move towards negativity. And then there's 3 unwholesome actions of mind: wanting what belongs to others. So this is kind of the intention of greed, or the intention of taking that which is not freely given. The next unwholesome action of mind is ill will or hostility. And then the third is wrong view. So wrong view is really looking at things, but not looking at them through the eyes of wisdom, which are that suffering is caused by craving, clinging, and aversion, and that by letting go of craving, clinging, and aversion, that we can find freedom from suffering, and that we should act in wholesome ways, which are generosity, virtue, and mindfulness or wisdom. So these 10 unwholesome actions, it's sometimes helpful to just look at that list and compare it to how we're operating in our lives, and just see if with any of these, if there's a way that we can withdraw our energy from them and to use our energy in a more helpful way. Wholesome action leads to happiness. And then I wanted to follow up with this with a little bit of conversation about the wanting mind. Thinking about the concept of non-attachment. For many of us, the concept of non-attachment is pretty difficult to grasp. I remember, for me, this was a really hard one when I started working with the teachings and with the Dhamma. It was like, I really had a hard time. What is this non-attachment? I kept coming back to over and over that non-attachment meant just not caring, just kind of checking out and saying, I don't give a damn what happens then. And in some way, I suppose that we might discover a little bit of a feeling of safety in that. It's like, I'll just check out and I won't care. And that tends to be just sort of the Western way of looking at non-attachment, that it is synonymous with not caring, or that compassion and non-attachment are somehow contradictory. But Buddhism, however, is not about not caring or being a passive doormat. On the contrary, it really is about action, freedom, and empowerment. But the neat thing is it's not a phony, egocentric empowerment like we would get through greed. But it's a real freedom from attachment type empowerment. And when I think about this non-attachment, we probably all have a recollection of that horrific image of during the Vietnam War, there was a monk who lit himself on fire in Saigon. And his name, Thich Quang Duc. And what he was protesting the Vietnam War in general, but he was specifically protesting the South Vietnamese government. The South Vietnamese government was supposed to be the good guys. He was protesting their mistreatment of Buddhist monks. The government felt threatened. The South Vietnamese government, they felt threatened by the Buddhist monks because there was it's not real different. Their beliefs on sharing and sharing what you have, giving what other people need to them, helping others. It's not real different from the idea of communism. At least that's the way they thought about it. And so the South Vietnamese government wanted to silence the monks and to quiet them down because they were sympathetic to this communist ideology. And it's a really extreme example, but he was non-attached to his own self enough that he was actually able to do that, to self-immolate. And it's horrible, but again, it's just an example of how a person can actually achieve that level of non-attachment. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's a good idea or that's something that any of us should do or to hurt ourselves in any way. But again, I'm just talking about how this idea of non-attachment does not necessarily mean a passive indifference, but it can mean a real action, a real spirit of taking action. Thich Nhat Hanh That Thich, T-H-I-C-H, that's Vietnamese for teacher, and it's kind of a title given to monks. So that's why Thich Quang Duc was called Thich, and Thich Nhat Hanh is called Thich. He's teacher. But Thich Nhat Hanh kind of coined the phrase or the term engaged Buddhism. He's a big time activist. He is not so much now because his health is failing, but he's been really a lifelong peace protester. Protested the Vietnam War, was active with Martin Luther King Jr. Was very vocal about the evils of war, whichever side it was. Both North and South were threatened by Thich Nhat Hanh because he was so honest. But he coined this phrase, engaged Buddhism, which was to kind of illustrate the fact that it's not just a passive indifference, but that we use these tools of being aware of how unwholesome reactions to things cause us to suffer, and often cause us to act in a way that causes suffering to other people. So then we talk about non-attachment, and the mind often just goes to, that means checking out. It means not caring or not doing. But really, what it means is that we let go of our attachments in such a way that we are able to act much more sincerely, much more effectively. We're able to give more. We're able to give without generating hatred, which if you're working from a place of hatred or ill will, which we've all done because we're human beings, you tend to generate more negativity, and then other people sort of get swallowed into that. So it's a very powerful thing to become aware of, but it's also helpful to know that just because you practice this Dhamma teaching, the Buddhism, and the non-attachment, it doesn't mean you have to let go of a very strong intention to make the world a better place, to do positive things, to help others, to protest, to be vocal. We can still do all those things, but we can do them in a way, like when you look at Thich Nhat Hanh or Martin Luther King or Gandhi, those people were so incredibly inspiring because their whole movement was about nonviolence, and it was about even self-sacrifice to a degree, and it was about doing what was right from a place of truth and love. And it's like, wow, it's like that's why these people are just immortalized in a way. So it's a very wonderful, very positive thing. And maybe I'll leave it here for tonight before we get into the next section, but I thought it was helpful to kind of bring this up, because we've all been talking about politics lately. We've all been talking about getting active and educating other people and doing things. So it's helpful to know that that's not a problem. That's not something we should avoid, but there's a way that we can do it with a wholesome mind, so we feel better and then we're more effective. And then we'll pick it up with that dukkha topic next week.
Does rabbi mean teacher too?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and Jesus in the
apostles would say rabbi.
Yeah, yep, they would call him rabbi, call him teacher. So and there's another example of someone, if you look at the historical Christ who self-sacrifice, putting himself out there, talking about what was unjust, it eventually cost him his life, just like Gandhi and Martin Luther King,
Gandhi, I heard some about Gandhi, for all of his peacefulness, he really was very, thought women should be in a certain place.
Mm-hmm.
And I was real surprised when I heard that he was for all that, and then he thought women should be doing a certain thing.
Yeah, I
But that was
think,
part of his religion or something that.
yeah, I think, we're all working on ourselves, and we're all still kind of children of our cultures and our conditioning, and, so there can be some pretty enlightened beings who still have some pretty,
Narrow views.
yeah, so some narrow views. But that's why I really think this kind of this loving kindness and compassion combined with the activism is so helpful, because then it's so much more persuasive, um, because it's not based on kind of a hostility thing, but it's really based on you know, hey, I think people of all sexual orientations should be able to marry the people they love. Why? Because I think love is just the most important thing there is, and so it should be celebrated. And so there's so many reasons that you can support it, without without having to hate the people that maybe aren't there yet. You
It's
think
not
of it.
about something that's going to harm you personally.
Yeah.
It's their.
Right. So.
It's abstract kind of,
Yeah, so I try to think of it as just we're all on our journey, we're all on our path, and right now, those folks aren't there yet, so maybe I can help them a little bit. But if I come at them with hostility and say, you're, you're horrible, I mean, then the barriers go up, and of course, that all comes to an end.
But
So.
they're still burning flags over in Hudson.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, everybody's on a different place on the path at different times, but, well, hey, we'll leave it here. We're at 8:30, so let's just take a minute before we go. And we'll just let go of the words, we'll let go of the teachings, the things we talked about. Kind of the mind gets full of all these interesting concepts and is kind of whirling with them. And we'll just take a real quick moment to come back to what is so important, which is compassion for other beings, knowing that there are beings who suffer in this world, and we cultivate the wholesome intention, again, samma sankappa, this wholesome intention that all beings should be free from suffering and from the causes of suffering. And then we cultivate this wholesome intention of loving kindness. May all beings be surrounded by love and kindness. And the wholesome intention of mudita, appreciative joy. May all beings be joyful and happy. And finally, the wholesome intention of upekkha, or equanimity. May all beings be peaceful and free from craving and clinging and aversion, in a place of peacefulness. And may you, sharing this space with me tonight, may you be truly, truly happy. Namaskar, everybody. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next week at the new place.
You know what you were saying about gossip before?
Uh-huh.
Isn't that kind of what the reality shows are based on? And some of them on TV, the Survivor trying to, they talk to each other and try to get rid of somebody, and
Pretty much
and then
exclusively.
the Kardashians and those housewives fighting and
Yeah.
that kind of, and so that's part of the culture in a way, is
Yeah, and then
gossip
and then a lot of it is, okay, how are you going to react to it? And of course, on those shows, like those reality shows, the people that react in the most outrageous fashion are the ones that are, gonna keep their jobs, in a sense. They're gonna be the ones who stay on the TV show. So, yeah. So I think that stuff is kind of harmful, because it really does teach us to, especially